I have to admit it's not an easy task. So first of all, excellencies, colleagues, partners, and all the more important experts on this really complex issue of deforestation and halting deforestation with all those facets in supply chains. My name is Thomas Baldauf. I work for the Ministry for Food and Agriculture. I'm one of those people who was working on the regulation in the negotiations as well. And my task for today could not be, I would say, more complex, because I have to bridge somehow from the political level to this nitty-gritty. The nitty-gritty is, of course, what does it mean in the area? What does it mean in terms of implementation? And what I want to do now is more or less comply with this task in three approaches, so to say. So I would want to tell you about the EUDR, so the EU Regulation for Deforestation-Free Products, the details that has already been done right now by His Excellency from the EU delegation here, the ambassador, which is really, really helpful. Where do we stand in terms of our implementation within the EU, within Germany? I think this is absolutely key to also present to you where we are currently, what is still happening, what tasks are still there. And then, of course, where are the sorry, those advances already in the implementation, and thereby, so to say, build the floor for those very much important technical discussions that we are envisaging for today and for tomorrow, and of course to come to those crucial solutions that we need to comply with this EU regulation, or even further to do our best to halt global deforestation. Why is it in some of those crucial processes Germany, who is quite active in this context? It's quite easily explained by two pictures. This is the first one. So what you can see, and I'm a forester myself, those green areas, those are forests. So you have the tropical belt, you have also the belt in Northern America and in Europe and Russia. And those are those forests we are talking about. And why is it Germany that is quite active in this context? Because the area that is lost due to deforestation or destruction of forests is more or less the area that Germany in total for forest area has. So this area of the German forests are lost throughout the global scale. That's why, that's one reason why Germany is quite intensively working in this context to comply with a huge task, as the ambassador just said and the governor just said, in deforestation. Normally, I tell the story that this slide is the mission impossible. Today, it's way more easy for me because the ambassador of the EU just told you the whole story behind the EU deforestation regulation. So those findings, why the 27 member states, the European Parliament, and the Commission were conformed that we need something in our hands to comply, to turn the tide on deforestation, so to say, and why the EU itself, as a major consumer of commodities where deforestation can be associated with forest degradation, is active and has to be active is more or less what you see on those 5 bullet points as findings. So it's 90% of global deforestation that is rooted in unsustainable agriculture. It's only a few relevant commodities that are responsible in terms of the trade to Europe or in Europe. The EU is a major consumer of those commodities, apart from China, US, and others. And the past measures that the world has designed to halt deforestation since decades, are not sufficient. So the global population set is in the Sustainable Development Goals, it's SDG 15, that we want to halt deforestation by 2020. And to be quite self-criticism, we failed with this target. We failed with this objective to halt deforestation. So the EU said we need to comply with this task and we need to accept our responsibility in this. And this, you can see here, was very well elaborated by the ambassador with a communication, and one part of this communication, this deforestation regulation. The last bullet is the need for a level playing field. I will put this aside and will try to engage in this and explain it a bit more intensively when I come to those 3 focus areas that Germany itself had for this regulation. Those last 4 bullet points have already been explained, so I will go quite fast across them. There's a mandatory due diligence for all operators of those relevant products when placing products on the EU market. Both imports, both national productions, both exports. So all our foresters, all our agricultural actors are in the same boat with you. We are building in the EU regulation on international definitions, international processes like the SDGs, and based on the WTO compatibility. What is very much important, I already said it with a level playing field, I will come to this in more detail, is that the EU-wide consistent controls is one of the crucial elements in this regulation and is absolutely one key focus area of Germany, what we tried to engage in the negotiations with others. And I will explain to you why this has been more or less an success. The last bullet point has been greatly introduced by the ambassador of the EU. The strategic cooperation with partner countries, I will go in more detail in this as well, what German position was on this. So there are a lot of slides, there are a lot of words. Sometimes it helps if you see a graph on it. This is an official graph from the EU Commission that was already presented some time ago. What we see here is more or less what you have already heard. Let's start not from the beginning, but let's start with a blue circle. This is more or less where those actors who are obliged to do something, directly obliged to do something with the EU regulation, are displayed. So the EU operator who imports soybeans, this is an example for soybeans, but you can translate it to other commodities and relevant products as well. They need to state that with this placing on the market within the products, no deforestation has happened and legal procedures have been applied. When I say no direct references to other actors, is only one part of the story. Of course, and that's what you see here quite well elaborated, you have to start at the beginning where a product is produced, grown, or cut, if you are talking about forests. So what you need is a segregated conformity value chain that leads to this EU operator. And to comply with this, I think here is the nitty-gritty that we should talk today a lot about it and tomorrow. What does it mean? Where are possible gaps? What are the approaches that are out there? And I have to admit there are a lot of approaches out there. We really see a lot of it. You also see this tiny satellite flying around there. This says that it's another crucial element for this regulation in terms of legal certainty. If the EU operator has done its job with fulfilling the due diligence, the regulation itself foresees that those areas where commodities are produced, relevant products are produced, are geolocated. This is one essential element which I think we will talk about today and tomorrow as well. Okay, so let's perhaps go to the next slide. I said that the EU operator, so the first person, the first firm, the first organization that places the product on the market, be it a German forester, be it a Dutch producing organization of chocolate, or be it some import in the course of an import procedure, needs to use this due diligence statement, which comes directly from this regulation, and has to confirm with sending in this statement to this information system that we have been talking about, that no risk or only, and now comes a very complicated English word, I try to engage in it, negligible risk was found. So that those products do not comply with those two elements of the regulation. No deforestation has happened to the cutoff date, 31st of December of 2020, which has to do with the SDG, and all legal provisions of this specific producing country have been fulfilled. With this statement, all EU operators are allowed then to go further on in their normal procedures, placing those products on the market. So this has to be done by the first person as an EU operator. So what is the name of this person who is handing in the statement? What are those codes for the relevant products, the quantity, be it tons or cubic meters, those relevant units that you need for this specific product? Where does it come from with the geolocation? And then I just skip ahead of 4, the statement by submitting, the operator confirms that everything is in order, that everything is conform, and the signature and date seems like from ancient times on paper, but this is all, everything is digital, what you see here. So this is part of the information system, what an EU operator then uses to fill in those blanks. I skip point 4 because it's a bit complex. If you're not the first one who is an EU operator, but the product or the product itself is sent to another operator in the value chain, then the further ones can reference to this first EU operator. And this is a very crucial issue, goes back to some of those thinkings that I said from Germany, to enhance the efficiency of this regulation. Okay, now I'm coming to the second part of my job here. Oh, thank you so much. Where's the preparation? How far is the preparation in the EU? How far is the preparation in Germany? What we heard is that the information system is a very crucial element in this regulation. You hand in those due diligence statements in it. They are in a legal certain environment where only those competent authorities in the EU member states who have to control if everything is in order have insights in. This is a very crucial element. EU Commission is working on this. There was a pilot testing. Perhaps some of you have participated in this room. Perhaps? I'll try it. It's a spontaneous reaction. Has anyone in this room participated in the pilot testing from the EU Commission? I know one, at least. Okay. Okay, two. Okay. It's not the best, the best number, but still, okay. The pilot testing was only to test if the system itself fulfills its functions. And I have to admit, from Germany, we spent a lot of time into this. And our feedback, formally it's feedback, we could say critics as well, our feedback was quite diverse. So EU Commission is working on that, absolutely, but a major improvement, and I really have to underline this, I'll come back to this later on, is that due to pressure from several member states, groups, operators, is that the information system, of course, will work with an API that's a technical interface to existing supply chain management systems. So no one has to fill in any data that has already been filled in another system. This is important. This is way important for the efficiency of the system. The benchmarking system, I think the Commission is working very hardly on this. The ambassador told you already that the benchmarking is, the results of the benchmarking shows where a country or parts thereof, so smaller areas, regions, where deforestation is an issue and where you have to further check on as an operator to really be in a position to comply with the regulation, but also for the competent authorities who will check it, there's a higher quota on it, EU-wide, uniform, higher quota on it. The one issue I think where the EU Commission and Member States are working currently very hard on, and which is more than relevant for this specific session here today and tomorrow, are those explanatory guidance and frequently asked questions, and well, I stated here questions and answers. Those answers are important. The regulation itself is a legal text. I'm only a forester, I always say, so a legal text is not so stringent that you go from Article 1 to 2 to 3. I make an example. Article 2 in the regulation is a compilation of all those definitions that are in this regulation itself. So if you read it from Article 1 to Article 36, I think, you won't have those answers what you really have to comply with in your process. Those answers are in there, but those frequently asked questions way more guide you through the system and the logic behind it. So those 86 answers you have here on paper, digital PDF, from the Commission and the Member States are very much important for all those discussions when you head towards the implementation or application of this regulation. There are coming in more guidelines. For example, this crucial word of negligible risk is more defined. What do those lawyers in EU think what this is? How can this be a bit more elaborated than in the legal text? And then we come to those exchange platforms where a lot of work is going in. So there's I think the largest one is the deforestation platform operated by the Commission in Brussels, where also other countries, third countries, are involved, highly involved. I know Brazil is a very active actor in this platform, but also Uruguay and Argentina I heard as well, from Paraguay. I'm sorry, I don't remember, but my brain is somehow perhaps not working so well today with the jet lag, but I'm sure that also Paraguay will participate in this deforestation platform. But also all those other actors, it's more than 300 actors that are involved in this platform, are exchanging on this nitty-gritty, are exchanging on those issues that you need to comply with and fulfill when you are applying this regulation. And then there are two other exchange platforms. I will go over them. CAP for Dev is capacity for development, where lessons learned are spent into the system. It's not yet in a situation where I think everyone should have a look at. It's more important to see this deforestation platform. The green data space is this larger picture the ambassador was talking about on the EU Green Deal, where also other processes within the EU with relevance to this regulation are displayed. So now leaving this EU level, I would try to engage a bit on this national level as well. What are we working on? We have, and we were even a bit faster, I have to admit, than the EU Commission. We have a national multi-stakeholder forum where about 300 national actors are engaged, are, well, actively engaged in this forum, mainly on, I would say, two tasks. The first one is more the task of the ministry, where we try to engage and explain what is happening in Brussels, what is happening to the regulation, where are those gaps, what needs to be filled in, what is this nitty-gritty. This is more this explanational role. And I forgot, those 300 actors are coming from economic actors, economic operators, from science, and from civil society. Currently, I would say we have at least 200 actors from the economic side. So, of course, the focus now is a lot more on this implementation stage. And when we identified this issue, we also included a second approach into this multi-stakeholder forum that is all the more important, and that's really comparable, I would say, for today, to today's meeting, where some of those actors are going forward and show where are they, where are those gaps, what needs to be filled in. And I have to admit, we are complying with this multi-stakeholder forum in this approach since more or less 1 year now. And we have seen a lot. We have seen excellent presentations from the timber sector. We have seen excellent presentations on the cattle sector. We have seen excellent presentations from coffee just 2 weeks ago. It's fantastic what's going out there, what's really going on with this implementation, this application of the regulation that is coming to us in just a few months. The second huge task we have to fulfill is a regulation in the EU doesn't need any law, any national law, because when it's in place, all 27 member states have to comply with it. But what we need, of course, is we need to find the way to implement it. Who is the one implementing it on the control side? This competent authority I was telling you about. And I will go on with this on just the next slide. And this national competent authority we need to develop. So it's not only the implementing law, where we define who is allowed to do what, and where we define those fines and sanctions, but also how this national competent authority is looking like. And for this, I'm just giving you a glimpse. We have never presented this, so I'm very keen on your reaction on this. In Germany, the Federal Office for Agriculture and Food, the BLE, Bundesanstalt für Landwirtschaft und Ernährung, BLE, the Federal Office for Agriculture and Food is the responsible competent authority. So why are we working with this federal office? The BLE already has expertise in those fields coming from a successor, a previous regulation that was activated 10 years ago on legal timber trade, EUDR. And they have a lot of experience how to comply with this due diligence, how to inform all those operators what to do, and of course to work with our customers. So this was one of the reasons why we said it's for Germany it will be the BLE. What is the task of this federal office, of this competent authority? So they are responsible for the overall enforcement. Control of operators and traders, cooperation and exchange of information between our customs and the BLE, but also between competent authority and other competent authority in the EU to have this level playing field. And then, of course, if something went wrong, there's a set of corrective actions that is in there, in this regulation itself, where the competent authority needs to work on. The information of operators and traders is one of those crucial tasks already happening right now. No controls are active, of course. No corrective action is active right now. The regulation has not to be applied yet in this transitional period, but the information is a hell of a task. Sorry for this expression. It's really a lot. And what we did is we tried to engage in some of those new technologies. The first one, of course, is this website, where you will find all those future technologies and links to it. Why am I so pushing on this one? Just to give you some figures. For Germany, it's about 1.9 million operators, possible operators for this regulation. 1.9 million. You can do the maths. If one of those 1.9 million are grabbing their phone and call BLE, what will happen? So it's just impossible. So we need some of those new technologies, of course, where all those information is out there. And then the last, certainly not the least one, is the contribution to methodological improvements. This methodological improvements also comprises technologies that are forensic ones, where a lot of thinking is going on currently, how to allow operators to cross-check if a product, a commodity, comes from the geolocation spot that is in there. That's just one example. Okay, I told you, and I'm looking to the moderator about the time. How far am I in time? It's fine. How still? Perfect. Perfect. So what I tried to give you now is a glimpse of the EU position, those 3 focal areas we had for this regulation. Those are just examples. It's a lot there, but those are relevant, I think, for today. The one is the level playing field, I already told you. So the level playing field is so much important because we do not want to only have conform legality to the regulation for the supply chains to Germany. We do not want only to have this to all those other EU member states. We want impact. We need impact. I think the ambassador and the governor, in their great speeches to this morning, or even Mr. Lampen with his very neatly comparison to Pelé, I think, are telling you the truth about how complex those issues are. So we need impact on a global scale with this. But breaking it down to the EU-wide level, we need uniform obligations. Those are in the regulation. The regulation itself is huge. We received a lot of critics on it. If you have a look at this processor, this EUDR, it was a very small, teeny tiny regulation. Why? Because it was just the starting point. The EUDR, this EU regulation on deforestation-free products, tries to engage in very specific issues that all member states have to follow. Quotas are in there. For operators, everything is in there. So there are uniform obligations in this regulation with a lot less room for maneuvering and interpretation that will generate problems in implementing it because you will not have this EU-level playing field. Some examples of those uniform obligations for all member states I stated here. It's an annual control plan which has to be handed in by all member states. Perhaps just to explain it a bit further, those annual control plans, the controls are not done by all those individual placing on the market processes, but operators are checked once they had handed in some products. And perhaps a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, depending on those risks that are there, you will be checked. Those EU operators will be checked. So not the individual charge, so to say, of a product will be checked, but the operator itself. And for that, we need the annual control plan. The minimum level of checks, as was already said, there's a reporting by all member states. And of course, to secure this level playing field, you are exchanging in a smaller group. I told you that there is a second one and a third one that we were really looking at from German side. It's efficiency. We need impact, but we also need efficiency. We do not want to have those paperwork for everyone for something that has already been done. So the benchmarking system is an essential system in this efficiency system. The simplified due diligence is an essential system for all those that have done their job, for all those where the risk of deforestation is low. SME operators, small medium enterprise operators, do not have to do the whole job again when it has already been done. If there's due diligence already checked, they can just refer to it. Non-SME operators may also refer to those statements that are already in there. This sounds simple, but it's a huge impact. It's a huge impact. And what I have already said, this interface to the information system, that you can just link, you can just forward those information into the EU system, what you think is important for that. And now I'm coming to the third one, and here my job is really easy because the EU ambassador has spent a lot of thinking on this, and that's great. Article 30. Article 30 in this regulation is a cooperation article. Has never been done in any regulation in the EU. We said, if you want impact with this regulation, we need to formalize this cooperation approach, this strategic approach in the regulation itself. There's a lot out there. The strategic comprehensive framework is one of those key issues. And I present here some of those ideas that are in there. The Team Europe initiative on deforestation-free value chains is one of those. Another one is the one you're sitting here right now. So there's bilateral work ongoing. There's bilateral work in Brazil happening. Mr. Melchers did a great job with his team in Brazil already in this setting. Also in Argentina now here, kickstarting this excellent work, but also very much needed work. And I have to admit, we were one of those 2 member states who told Commission, who told the European Parliament, without that, it's not the regulation that we can comply with. It's not the regulation we can accept. So this is a lot in there, and I have to, well, Germany proudly presents, so to say, there's a lot of work and finance and support in there from Germany. This is a very delicate but also complex slide, I have to admit. And I want only to spend some thinking on those red items because they have not been addressed so far. You see here requirements and chances. The deforestation regulation normally is seen as requirements. Sometimes positive, sometimes negative. And we have said a lot just now on the strategic cooperation approach. There's a lot in there that you have already heard on. But 3 issues I did not tell you or just now. The one is, as a requirement, if we do not compete with the goal, the central goal in this regulation, which goes far beyond EU, which is avoid deforestation, halt deforestation, the loss by inaction, the costs of inaction will be dramatic. And I have not to tell you this more in detail because science is telling us. This is absolutely key. There's no possibility to comply with the Paris Agreement without working on deforestation. Absolutely not. There's no fulfillment of those biodiversity targets we have there without working on deforestation. Now the chances, the transparency in supply chain, and why am I telling you this so prominently? If you enhance resilience and minimize disruptions, if you want to enhance resilience and minimize disruptions in your supply chains, you have to have a transparent view and information about your supply chains. It's key. It does not have to do formally first with the regulation itself. You need this. And all of us know this, at least since 2 years or 3 years. With Corona kicking in, anyone knows what it does mean if a supply chain doesn't work. Everyone. I don't have to give a lot of thinking on this. But it's highly relevant. And if you comply with this EU regulation or are working on approaches in this transparency in supply chain will be done all the same for you as well. So try to engage in this, use the chances. And now perhaps being more concretely on today and tomorrow, enjoy competitive advantages. To enjoy is always something nice. So if you are one of those first movers for this one, you will enjoy competitive advantages for that. Absolutely sure. Okay, what are the key takeaways? And now, sorry, it's 2 minutes? Perfect. The key takeaways, what did I want to tell you today? The EUDR, so the EU, I don't like this abbreviation, but that's a personal notion. The EU regulation on deforestation-free products is an answer to not being reached of SDG 15.2. That was the lesson learned from EU member states. It's based on principles. Those principles are transparency, accountability, all on sound scientific and methodological basis. It's inconsistency with international commitments. It builds on lessons learned, absolutely crucial. It's non-discriminatory. You heard this already various times this morning. Domestic and imported products are treated equally. Equally, I have to underline it. It covers both imports and exports. It allows for a legal, sound, effective hopefully efficient enforcement, and it will have an impact on suppliers, whether in the EU or abroad. So now to understand this, I hope you are remembering this supply chain graph I showed you at the beginning. This blue circle around the EU operator. He's obliged, she's obliged to do this. But it will have an indirect effect on you if you want to participate in this work and if you want to participate in this trade to EU for all these relevant products. All relevant actors need to get ready, so all the relevant actors who want to participate need to get ready for the application by the end of this year. This is, well, no time to waste still. It's a lot. And the positive notion at the end, the EU and its member states stand ready, want to work closely with you in this partnership approach, Article 30, in this transition to the broader picture, sustainable agriculture, sustainable forest management, and development of transparent and sustainable supply chains. And I think here kicks in all this action that we are seeing from our side in this agricultural policy dialogue or other equivalent dialogues as, for example, here in Argentina. And with this, I tried my best to comply with the languages. Thank you very much. Vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit. And I stand ready for all those questions. Thank you.
Colleagues, that was a really great presentation, and I thank our speaker very much for the German efficiency in ending promptly according to our schedule. Now, before going into a little bit of questions and answers amongst all of you, I want to highlight some key points. Yesterday at our dinner, I was very fortunate in meeting a new group of colleagues and friends from Uruguay, and who I very much appreciate. We had the opportunity to chat about different aspects of EUDR and impacts and needs, et cetera. And one really important point that I started, at least from introducing with them, is looking at the relative impact of EUDR around the world, right? The World Bank in December of last year issued a heat map of where the EUDR will hit which export markets the most, looking at all of the commodities, right? Not only in soy and beef, as we're talking today, but also timber, rubber, cocoa, coffee, et cetera. And in Latin America, the two most impacted countries are Honduras, right, looking at relative their coffee exports to the European Union, and Uruguay. And Uruguay comes at 16% total of its exports will have some kind of impact related to their exports to the European Union, primarily in the timber sector, but also to a lesser degree in the beef and soy, particularly soy oil subsectors. So we know that much needs to be done here in kind of really focusing on that. And I can share that data with you. It's very exciting. Argentina is around 5% of its total exports in total. Now, what we heard from Mr. Baldauf, very interesting from his presentation, he showed a really great graph or an image, excuse me, looking at the entire supply chain, right, from downstream all the way upstream to Uruguay, Argentina, Paraguay, et cetera. And one specific image there was concentrated on that due diligence statement, right? And that due diligence statement, we know, is the end of the entire process, right? So to create the due diligence statement is in fact the easiest part, because that means your job is completed, right? And that needs to be uploaded to the system that we heard that the European Commission is currently developing with member states. But the due diligence process in itself is extremely challenging, as we heard, right? This is where all of the nitty-gritty and almost nerdy technical issues are involved along the way, right? Now, with that, oftentimes we get lost in discussing EUDR. There's so many macro conversations and geospatial issues, and there's so many moving components that it's oftentimes very difficult to be concentrated and look at really what is being asked and which actors need to do what, right? Is it government? Is it companies? Is it civil society organizations, right? And with that, I have to mention as well that the FAO and the World Bank are leading a study here in Argentina that I'm part of this team, looking at the cost of EUDR in Argentina, specifically in the beef sector. So I'll be looking for many of you in Cordoba and in Buenos Aires in May for individual meetings to discuss. But also, that brings me to my point of saying that one of the higher risk groups are enterprises, right? Why? Enterprises, as we know, employ people. If people lose jobs as a result of markets, that affects poverty, right? And in countries such as Argentina, where we've reached 45% of poverty, that could have detrimental impacts, right? So we really need to look at how can we support enterprises in particular to be able to understand what they need to do in this process. Now, with the support of the German government, I always forget the long version, excuse me, German colleagues, the German Federal Ministry for Cooperation and Development, the BMZ, myself and my colleagues from the OECD developed an OECD business handbook on deforestation and agricultural supply chains, which helps companies understand a little bit about how to exactly compartmentalize the process of I wouldn't say reporting, gathering data from suppliers at different points in the chain. It's very useful and it's available in Spanish, so I'm happy to share that with you as well at the end. Now, one last point, I'm going to open up to the floor now for some questions on the presentations or general questions at large, but I'd also like you to ask at the middle of your tables here, you're going to see a QR code. Now, I've been asked for our colleagues to scan that when you do get a chance and answer some of the questions there. That will help us collect a little bit of data in terms of needs within the context of the EUDR and its implementation in your respective countries. So I'm going to begin. I'm going to put my glasses on here because I'm a little bit blind. So I'm going to begin here with looking if there's any questions first according to the presentations or just general technical questions concerning what we've been discussing thus far. I'd also ask you to remain focused on a technical type of question rather than individual personal statements, to make sure that we drive technical and useful dialogue in moving forward. Are there any hands? Please, colleague. If you can please begin with just introducing your name and your organization, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Daniel Vargas, Getúlio Vargas Foundation in São Paulo. So I'm curious about the criteria of the plot rather than the property itself. If the export needs to be justified based on the plot, wouldn't that create an open door for one property composed by many plots actually make a selective strategy to use those plots where there has been no deforestation to export to Europe, but at the same time, in different plots, eventually have some kind of deforestation? So that's one question. If the focus is on the plot rather than the property, wouldn't that create that opportunity or that door? The second concrete question is, what exactly is the difference between traders and operators in the requirements of the EUDR?
Right. Thank you very much. That's a very, very technical question you've answered, or you've respected the guidelines very well. I'd like to open the floor for colleagues. I have an answer to this, but I don't want to drive the conversation myself. I'm looking at our colleagues perhaps in Argentina, Fernanda, from the EU's funded facility here. Maybe you'd like to chime in? No? No? Should I just have a go and answer it myself, right? So regards to your question was concerning plots. Yes, the focus is on plots. Now, it's much more, we have right here. Please, go ahead. If we can pass the microphone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I think it's, the first one is a really technical but complex one. So the regulation itself works with a geolocation provision. You need the geolocation And for areas smaller than 4 hectares, you need to pinpoint one GPS signal, so to say. One could be GPS, but could also be a spot on the map to spot this area where those commodities and products are produced. For larger than 4 hectares, you need to identify a set of coordinates, which is usually, the terminology is a polygon, to describe the area where the products comes from. So that's the technical answer from the regulation to your question. But what you say is a very delicate and very implicit issue that we need to respect within this regulation and the application of this regulation itself. First, we need to avoid leakage to other markets, so to say. What you said is, or not directly said, but perhaps implicitly said, is that when all those conform material products go to Europe and this inconform products go to another market somewhere else, bottom line impact is zero of this regulation. Nothing is happening at all. We were absolutely sure that this needs to be tackled, but it cannot be tackled in the EU regulation itself. It needs to be tackled in parallel processes, like, for example, our work from Germany within the G7 frame. So what we heard is that UK, for example, is working on a similar approach. Also, there's a Biden decree from the US working on a similar approach to avoid this leakage issue. There are further work, for example, by FAO, great work on this, in this direction. So to avoid leakage is one of those crucial elements we need to address, but it cannot implicitly be addressed by an EU regulation. The second item to your question is there a possibility of circumvention, so to say? So can I just attribute those products to one conform geolocation, so to say, and that's it? Well, yes. You can walk across a red light on the street as well. But it's not legal, it's not conform, and it can be counter-checked. That's what I was elaborating a bit on, that there exists methodology to trace back a product on isotopes. I hope this is the correct English terminology, isotopes, equivalents in German, to come back to this origin where the product was produced in. The second question, I can't read my, difference of operators and traders. I could just use the text of the regulation itself, but it's of no any help. So I'll try it with my own words. The operator is the first one who places a product on the market, be it the German forester cutting down a tree, felling the tree, forwarding it to a sawmill, then he has to comply with the regulation, or the one who is importing from third countries into Europe market, and the release from the port, so to say, is given, then he or she has to comply with the regulation. That's the operator. There's a beautiful word in German, no one will ever understand, even in Germany not, it's Erstinverkehrbringer. Germans tend to, add all those word components together, and then you have a word that size, Erstinverkehrbringer. The operator is the first one who is placing something on the market. The trader is the one who receives from the operator the product and gives it to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, and then there's the end consumer. Nitty-gritty, also here for the nitty-gritty, what happens if the operator imports soybeans, or let's say another one, cocoa beans, and then there's a production of chocolate. The chocolate is a new product, then the one who is placing the chocolate on the market is an operator. So it could be operator trader, operator, and then trader again. But this is already going into this nitty-gritty, but I hope you answered your question as well.
I'm going to move to our next question here. Colleague, please, you have the floor.
My name is André Nasser. I'm from the ABIOV, the Brazilian Association of Oilseed Crushers. Actually, I want to answer Daniel's question to help Thomas, if you don't mind, Thomas. Because the idea is having a plot of land, different plot of lands inside the farm is not a problem, right? If that plot of land is free of deforestation, the soybean or any product produced there is okay with the legislation regarding the deforestation. Of course, there is all the discussion about the legality, and then the legality has to be measured at the level of the farm, not at the level of the plot of land. But the competent authority can trace back that plot of land, check the farm, and see if the farm had deforestation. And then the competent authority would say to the operator, you have to present to me mitigation measures to reduce the risk of the contamination or the mixing, the commingling, I don't know the term, in the farm, right? So it's possible to do it. Of course, it would be much easier for the exporter who is going to provide the plot of land for the trader, for the operator, not sourcing from that farm, right? Because you could have a product planted in a deforested area, and then you would need to segregate it at the level of the farm, which is far more complicated. So let's see how the exporters and the operators are going to behave. Some would take more risks, others not. That's why we are insisting a lot with Thomas that we need the competent authorities to explain to us how they want the risk assessment. Because depending on the risk assessment, the criteria, everything that has to be done on the risk assessment and the mitigation measures, companies will behave differently in terms of sourcing, right? And for now, we have nothing on the risk assessment and the mitigation measures that the competent authorities are expecting from the operators and then from the exporters. So that's why this is so urgent, because otherwise we will be informed about those guidelines in December 30, in December Christmas, right? And when is the 1st of January, we will start to export to Europe, and we need to do the risk assessment, and then that will be a kind of a hard landing, as we are saying. We need a soft landing, right? So we need those guidelines defined by now. Otherwise, companies will not know what to do when they are sourcing. Okay, thanks. Sorry for the statement. I've tried to answer the question.
Please. Thank you very much. No, that's very helpful, and you know, you definitely bring some excellent points here. You know, Dr. Baldauf illustrated some really great examples looking at different sectors, and as we know, every supply chain is very, very different, right? The timber chain has nothing to do with a rubber supply chain and rubber exports and the way that they're focused. So we have individual sector discussions today, right, on the two floors that I'm hoping will be able to provide a little bit more answers to your questions, right? When we gather together minds, we can, you know, shed light on some very complex issues. So that will help, you know, hopefully elucidate some of your questions. You know, in very rightfully so, we hear from other sectors around the world, you know, and a request to delay the deadline for December as well, right? So, you know, that's always something that could be potentially possible. We don't know, right? So I think that it's important now to look at technical solutions and what we can do at this moment, and then later as time moves on, we see, you know, what's needed there moving forward. But I appreciate your question, and thank you very much.
Soy Sonia Tomasone, de la Cámara de Exportadores de Cereales y Oleaginosas de Paraguay. Entre las muchas preguntas, muchos gaps que encontramos, una de las que sí es preocupante, y ahí me pongo desde el lado del operador en Europa. Si yo soy un operador en Europa, una de las condiciones es dar la geolocalización de la finca. Digamos que eso con tecnología, con tiempo, puede ser cumplido. Pero otras de las condiciones sine qua non es cumplir la legislación doméstica. Si yo soy un operador en Europa, ¿cómo yo puedo tener la seguridad de que mi proveedor en un tercer país está cumpliendo su legislación doméstica? Ahí va a llevar a lo que dijo Andrés, que ante la duda dejo de comprar y las subsecuentes consecuencias tanto para el vendedor como para el comprador. Porque si me pongo del lado de Europa y voy a pedirle a todos mis proveedores toda esta cantidad de cosas, la gente no me va a vender. Quiere decir que yo, europeo, también me quedo sin proveedores. O sea, es un problema de los dos lados. ¿Por qué no se quiere aceptar la documentación emitida por la autoridad nacional competente? Así como sucede con un fitosanitario. Si yo exporto un producto y tengo un fitosanitario emitido por mi autoridad competente que me dice que cumple, ¿por qué eso no puede ser como un camino suficiente para dar seguridad al importador?
Sí.
Esa es la pregunta.
Muchísimas gracias. Sí, y tienen razón, y tienen algunas preguntas muy importantes acá. Uno en particular es que los proveedores tienen que hacer algo sí o sí. Entonces, por eso tenemos que han pensado con el sistema de debida diligencia. Entonces, hay una manera para hacerlo, pero ya estamos hablando de cómo se hace eso en una manera técnica. Entonces, sí, hay muchas preguntas, pero hoy y mañana vamos a tener un poco más de respuestas técnicas sobre las preguntas estas, pero es que si los proveedores no pueden cumplir, es que tal vez pueden perder el mercado europeo. Entonces, necesitamos hacer todo lo que podemos para asegurar los mercados y los proveedores también. Entonces, ya por eso estamos aquí, señora, para hablar de todo eso. Muchísimas gracias.
Mi nombre es Catalina Raba, soy del Ministerio de Ganadería, Agricultura y Pesca de Uruguay. Quería consultar acerca de una parte de la presentación que vimos recién, donde se mencionó que si los países adheríamos a esta iniciativa, podíamos tener ventajas competitivas o ser los primeros actores en disfrutar beneficios o algo así, por lo menos interpreté yo, y quería ver si se podía ampliar acerca de a qué se refieren cuando mencionan esas ventajas competitivas y qué beneficios serían. Gracias.
Gracias, Catarina. ¿Alguien tiene una respuesta para Catarina?
I'll try to be brief because I do absolutely not want to hold you back from coffee in my own interest as well. So I think I will cover the previous answer a bit as well, if you allow, Mr. Moderator. I think this goes back to what is defined as those nationally, I'm trying to get the relevant legislation of the country of production, right, to be certain. There are issues that are in this relevant legislation that are listed there. Those are examples. Why are those examples? Because not for everyone all of those issues are relevant. An example, let's say, the relevance of indigenous peoples in a certain area. If there are no indigenous peoples in this certain area, you don't have, well, the check is quite neatly done. So, but what I want to tell you is that we received a lot of feedback on that one, especially the Commission did. And I think the lessons learned and the solution for this, and I really want to talk about solutions today as well, and tomorrow, is that for all countries, there will be a repository possible to hand in what are those relevant legislations that are out there, for example, in Brazil, in Argentina, in Uruguay, or in Paraguay. And with this repository, everyone knows what to check, detailedly check. EU is not the one to tell others what their relevant legislation is. We cannot do this, we don't want to do this, absolutely no. But if you want to comply with it, those are the relevant legislations of the country. And this bridges to the second question that's why I wanted to come back to that one. Bridges to the question from you, from Uruguay. If you ask about this, what is the competitive advantage? This is an example for that one. If you hand in a repository, what is relevant for your country, it's way more easy for others to comply with it, to check it, to detailedly check it, what has to be fulfilled or checked. In many issues, I would say, are not relevant for all those specific issues. Then tax, anti-corruption, trade, custom regulations. Well, this is reality, of course, but perhaps it can be checked easily. So the repository would be one of those approaches, the solutions, for me to say that someone has a competitive advantage if you display this to the wider public, because then you know what to do for your specific circumstance. I could go on, but we can do this perhaps with a cup of coffee in my hand. Thank you so much.